Hello guys, welcome to my channel where stories filled with revenge, moral lessons, and love are told. Go ahead and encourage them to like, share with their friends, and subscribe. I still remember the day I got the call from Uncle Leonard's lawyer. It felt like my whole life had tilted on its axis in a single moment. Uncle Leonard, the man I hadn't seen in over a decade, had left me $11 million. $11 million. I sat there in my small apartment in Chicago, heart hammering, staring at the polished legal letter as if it might vanish if I blinked. My fingers shook as I dialed Derek's number, itching to share the news with him. He had always been my rock, or at least that's what I had believed, but now, I was about to discover just how fragile appearances could be. Derek picked up on the first ring, his voice warm and familiar. "Elena, is everything okay?" I could hear the concern threading through his words, and I almost choked on the excitement building in my chest. "Derek, you won't believe this," I whispered, trying to keep the shock contained. "Uncle Leonard, he left me a fortune, $11 million. I thought I'd hear excitement, maybe even pride. Instead, I detected a faint hesitation, like the warmth in his tone had been measured and restrained, but I pushed that thought aside. This was my moment, the kind of news that changed lives. The plan was simple. I would drive to our shared weekend house outside the city, tell Derek in person, and celebrate together. The sky was overcast that afternoon, the clouds low and heavy, mirroring the whirlwind in my mind. I remember gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles whitened. My heart was light, my thoughts spinning with possibilities. Renovations, trips, finally clearing old debts. I didn't see the black sedan until it cut in front of me sharply. The screech of tires, the crunch of metal against metal, and then everything became a blur. Pain, bright and raw, exploded through my body, and the world tilted violently as my car spun off the road. I could hear the faint echo of Derek's voice in my head, as if he were somewhere far away, not reaching me in that terrifying moment. When I woke, everything smelled of antiseptic. The steady beeping of machines was relentless, a grim reminder that I had survived but barely. My body was bruised, my limbs trembling from the shock and pain, my hands wrapped in thick bandages. Nurses bustled around me, checking monitors, administering medication, their faces professional but their eyes sympathetic. I tried to sit up, to call out for Derek, but a sharp sting in my chest forced me back against the pillow. Fear clawed at me, not just from the accident, but from the gnawing thought that Derek wasn't here. Hours passed, maybe days, but the sense of isolation only deepened. The world outside my hospital room moved on while I lay there, half-conscious, fighting to breathe through the haze of morphine and disbelief. It wasn't until lawyer Thomas visited that the first flicker of betrayal settled in my chest like ice. "Elena," he said gently, sliding into the chair beside my bed, "I have some difficult news about Derek." I could barely process the words. My mind looped through possibilities, each more horrifying than the last. And then came the reality. Derek had abandoned me. He had left the hospital without a word, leaving me entirely dependent on strangers, and within weeks, he had remarried a woman named Isla. A woman who, I would later learn, bore a resemblance to me so uncanny it was almost grotesque. The revelation hit me like another crash, the betrayal folding into my chest like a cruel, unrelenting vice. As the days bled into one another, my physical wounds began to heal, but the emotional gash Derek had left widened with every rumor I heard about Isla. The nurses, the hospital staff, even the quiet conversations in the hallways whispered truths I wasn't ready to accept. Derek wasn't just gone, he had orchestrated a life without me, marrying Isla and embedding her in the world we had built together. At first, I couldn't understand why. I replayed every memory, every shared moment with Derek, searching for signs I might have missed. Every smile, every late-night conversation now felt like it had been a calculated performance to draw me in while he plotted his betrayal. The realization was both numbing and electrifying. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but my body was fragile, my strength siphoned by injuries and grief, yet amidst the fog of betrayal, a faint spark of clarity appeared. I remembered Uncle Leonard's words from our last encounter before his death, a short phone call filled with nostalgia and unfinished apologies. "Elena," he had said, "life is unpredictable. Don't let anger or regret cloud your choices. Be careful, but be brave." Those words resonated now, like a lifeline, reminding me that this inheritance was more than just money. It was the key to reclaiming my life, to asserting control over a world Derek thought he could manipulate. My resolve hardened. I could survive the crash, recover from the physical trauma, and confront the emotional devastation Derek had left behind. The hospital room, once a prison of pain and disorientation, began to feel like the threshold to something greater. I noticed small details. The way sunlight streamed through the blinds, the gentle hum of the air purifier, the quiet gestures of the staff who treated me not just as a patient but as a human being deserving dignity. In those moments, I began to piece together a plan not for revenge yet, not fully but for survival, for reclaiming the life that Derek had attempted to steal. I started writing lists in my journal, drafting letters I might never send, imagining conversations where I would finally confront him, and sketching the outline of a life post-betrayal. Then, one afternoon, as I was practicing walking with the assistance of a cane, a nurse whispered something that made my pulse spike. "Elena, you should know, Derek's new wife. She looks exactly like you." My hands froze on the cane, my mind spinning in a vortex of confusion. "What do you mean?" I demanded, fear and curiosity sharpening my voice. She lowered her voice, glancing around to make sure no one overheard. "I've seen photographs. It's uncanny. Almost as if you two are related." My breath hitched. I sank into the nearest chair, my body trembling for reasons that were no longer just physical. Could it be possible? Could Derek have chosen her deliberately, someone who resembled me, to cement his deception? The thought was unbearable. Over the following days, the threads of Derek's betrayal began to unravel further. Lawyer Thomas unearthed emails, marriage certificates, and even questionable documents hinting at Isla's true identity. It was like a puzzle being laid bare piece by piece, and the final picture was almost incomprehensible. Derek had manipulated every aspect of my life, and my Isla was the final cruel twist. My biological daughter, whom I had given up 17 years ago, was now entwined in Derek's schemes, unaware of her connection to me, yet positioned to play a role in a game of greed and deceit I never wanted to be part of. I spent countless nights staring at the ceiling, replaying every memory with Derek, every decision I had made, and the accident itself. I questioned my judgment, my trust, my capacity to forgive or even to feel safe again. And yet, through the haze of pain, a tiny flame of determination burned. I would survive not just the crash, not just Derek's betrayal, but the tangled web of deception he had spun. I would find a way to confront the truth, to reclaim my inheritance, and ultimately, to face Isla, not as an adversary, but as a daughter I had lost and longed to know. Even in those first weeks of recovery, as my body ached and my spirit felt bruised beyond measure, I realized that the accident had inadvertently given me time. Time to reflect, to prepare, to understand that wealth without control or knowledge could be more dangerous than poverty. Derek had assumed he could exploit my vulnerabilities while I was incapacitated, but he had underestimated the strength that grief, pain, and love for a child, even one lost to the past, could inspire. The turning point came on a rainy afternoon when Lawyer Thomas brought me documents confirming Derek's financial maneuvers and Isla's adoption papers. My pulse quickened, not with fear, but with anticipation. The pieces were finally there. The inheritance, Derek's schemes, Isla's identity all converged into a single, shocking revelation that would force a confrontation sooner than anyone anticipated. For the first time since the crash, I felt a surge of clarity. The road to justice, to healing, and to reclaiming my life was long, but I was ready. Pain had forged a determination in me, one that Derek's betrayal could not extinguish. As the first section of my story closes, I remain in that hospital bed, fragile yet fierce, knowing that every step I take toward recovery is a step toward confronting Derek and eventually toward embracing a connection I never thought I would have the chance to know my daughter, Isla, and to reclaim the life that had been stolen from me. The accident may have left scars, both visible and hidden, but it also illuminated the path I must take, a path filled with challenges, revelations, and the promise of eventual vindication. From the moment I learned Derek had abandoned me, a sense of disbelief and raw anger consumed every thought. I had survived a crash that should have ended me, only to find that the man I trusted most had used that moment to cut me out of my own life. The hospital became my battleground, not one with walls and weapons, but with papers, whispers, and the quiet plotting of a mind forced to awaken from shock. Lawyer Thomas was my anchor through it all, patiently explaining Derek's schemes, showing me documents, emails, and bank transfers that revealed a web of deceit so intricate it made my chest ache with betrayal. Derek had not only married Isla, but he had orchestrated a network of lies, forged signatures, manipulated wills, and financial maneuverings designed to strip me of the inheritance that Uncle Leonard had left me. When I first met Isla, it was in a small, sunlit room at the hospital. She had been visiting Derek, her adoptive parents hovering nearby, unaware of the truth connecting her to me. I caught a glimpse of her as she laughed softly, her features so like mine it sent a shiver down my spine. I could feel the pull of recognition, though I couldn't yet tell her, couldn't yet shatter her sense of reality. The nurse gently nudged me forward, warning me that this confrontation could be emotionally dangerous. I nodded, swallowing hard. My voice was steady, even though my hands shook. "Hello, Isla?" I called softly. She turned, and the moment our eyes met, the resemblance was undeniable. She froze, her smile faltering as confusion flashed across her face. You look just like me," she whispered, her voice trembling. That was the moment I realized that Derek had woven his cruelty in a way I could never have imagined. He hadn't just abandoned me, he had inserted my own daughter into the plan to manipulate and control. Lawyer Thomas and I spent endless hours mapping out Derek's fraud. Each discovery was a punch to the gut. He had forged my signature on documents, created false medical records, and even attempted to simulate my death to expedite his claim on the estate. The magnitude of his betrayal was breathtaking, and yet it lit a fire in me I hadn't felt in years. I began to gather evidence meticulously, ensuring every detail was documented, every paper cross-referenced. I became a patient hunter, tracking Derek's lies with precision, knowing that justice required more than anger, it demanded strategy. I was no longer just a victim lying in a hospital bed. I was a force poised to reclaim what was mine. Isla, meanwhile, remained unaware of the depth of the deception. My heart ached watching her interact with Derek, the way she trusted him completely, how she mirrored my gestures, laughed at his jokes, and hung on his every word. I couldn't reveal the truth immediately. It would have shattered her world, and I needed her intact to confront Derek effectively. Instead, I started slowly, planting subtle questions, sharing pieces of my story, and watching her reaction. There were moments when I thought she might sense the connection, the same mannerisms, the tilt of the head, the way her eyes softened when she laughed, but the truth remained hidden, carefully cloaked under layers of careful words and quiet observation. The hospital staff, once merely my caregivers, became allies in subtle ways. Nurse Michelle and Dr. Alvarez noticed the stress etched into my features and offered support without prying too deeply. They helped me move through physical therapy, yes, but they also provided emotional guidance, reminding me to pace myself, to breathe, and to prepare mentally for the confrontation looming over me. Their quiet encouragement became a balm, a reminder that I wasn't completely alone in this fight. Even in the darkest hours of betrayal, there were people rooting for me, people whose trustworthiness I could rely upon. One evening, after weeks of careful observation, Isla visited alone. She seemed hesitant, her eyes flicking nervously toward the door, as if she sensed tension in the air. I gestured for her to sit across from me, my heart pounding in my chest. "Isla, there's something important you need to know about your father." "And about me," I began, my voice steady despite the flood of emotions. She looked at me, confusion and apprehension warring across her face. What do you mean?" she asked, her fingers twisting nervously in her lap. I inhaled slowly, choosing my words with care, knowing that the revelation could change everything. "Your father, Derek, has been dishonest, not just with me, but with you. And there's something else, something I need you to understand about who I am." Her eyes widened, fear and curiosity mingling, and I saw the first spark of recognition, faint but undeniable. As I shared pieces of the truth carefully, deliberately I watched Isla's expression shift. Confusion became disbelief, disbelief morphed into shock, and shock slowly gave way to questions, to a need for clarity. You're my mother?" she whispered, her voice trembling as tears formed in the corners of her eyes. I nodded, feeling a mixture of relief, sorrow, and an almost overwhelming love that surged through me. "Yes, Isla, I had to make choices then that I now regret, but I am here, and I will never leave you again." The weight of those words pressed down on us both, yet there was a strange sense of liberation in finally speaking them aloud. The connection was raw, fragile, and terrifying but real. Derek, of course, did not remain passive. As soon as he learned that I was regaining strength and evidence against him was solidifying, he became aggressive, manipulative, and desperate. He tried to intimidate Isla, whispering lies to undermine her trust in me, claiming I was unstable, that my accident had changed me, that I was unfit to be in her life. But Isla, despite the initial shock, began to see the cracks in his facade. Her innate intelligence, combined with subtle hints I had left her, allowed her to question Derek in ways I could not yet openly. She started noticing discrepancies in his stories, in his explanations, in the documents he showed her. Slowly, the seed of doubt began to grow. Meanwhile, my own recovery continued, both physical and emotional. The accident had left scars, yes, but it had also forged resilience. My body grew stronger, my mind sharper, and my determination more unwavering. I worked with lawyer Thomas to prepare the case meticulously, documenting every interaction, every forged document, every attempt by Derek to manipulate both me and Isla. Each discovery added fuel to my resolve, and every meeting with Isla strengthened the fragile bond we were beginning to form. She began to trust me, slowly letting go of the confusion and fear, and allowing a tentative mother-daughter connection to emerge. The climax of Derek's deception finally approached when he attempted to transfer the inheritance into accounts. That excluded both me and Isla, but thanks to careful documentation, legal maneuvering, and a well-timed confrontation, he found himself cornered. I orchestrated a meeting, not just with Isla, but with lawyer Thomas and witnesses who could attest to the fraud and manipulation. Derek's confident demeanor faltered the moment he realized he had underestimated both my strength and Isla's growing understanding. He tried to lie, to deflect, to intimidate, but the truth was unshakable. Every forged signature, every falsified document, every whispered lie had been traced, recorded, and catalogued. Isla, witnessing the unraveling of Derek's plan firsthand, finally began to process the complexity of the betrayal. She saw the man she thought she loved for what he truly was, a manipulator who had used her likeness to try to cement his control over someone else's life. Her anger mirrored my own, but unlike me, she had the advantage of youth, clarity, and the support of her adoptive parents. Together, we formed a silent alliance, a bond forged in shared betrayal and mutual recognition of the man we both had trusted. By the time Derek was arrested, the weight that had pressed upon me since the crash began to lift. Justice had not erased the pain, nor had it immediately healed the wounds, but it had restored a sense of order to a world that Derek had attempted to fracture completely. Isla and I began the slow, careful process of building a genuine relationship, starting with conversations that ranged from guarded to heartfelt, learning each other's quirks, fears, and hopes. Each shared memory, each revelation, each laugh, even tentative and unsure, helped to knit together the fragments of a mother-daughter bond that had been violently torn apart 17 years prior. Through these weeks, I also realized how much the inheritance itself had been a tool not just for Derek's manipulation, but for our healing. The money became a symbol of control reclaimed, a means to ensure that Derek could never again impose his will on our lives. It was no longer just wealth. It was a weapon of empowerment, a tangible representation of survival, strategy, and the reclamation of dignity. I knew that my next steps would be crucial, to transform this inheritance into something that honored Uncle Leonard's memory, supported Isla, and allowed both of us to heal while protecting the life we had fought to reclaim. The betrayal, the deception, and the emotional torment had left indelible marks on both Isla and me. But amidst the chaos, a new understanding emerged. The truth, once revealed, could not be undone, but it could be navigated with honesty, courage, and love. Isla began to see me not as a stranger, not as an intruder into her life, but as her mother, the woman who had survived, who had endured, who had fought through betrayal and pain to stand before her, finally whole, evenings spent in quiet conversation, walks along the hospital garden paths, and shared moments of vulnerability gradually transformed into a bond neither Derek nor circumstance could destroy. The layers of fear, confusion, and mistrust peeled away slowly, replaced by the tentative threads of trust, empathy, and shared purpose. Derek's schemes, no matter how intricate, could not sever the primal connection between mother and daughter, and each day that passed reinforced the notion that love, when nurtured, could emerge even from the depths of calculated betrayal. As this chapter of my story closes, I stand on the edge of recovery and revelation, looking toward a future in which Derek's influence is diminished, Isla and I are connected, and the inheritance serves as both shield and instrument for rebuilding our lives. The road ahead will demand patience, courage, and perseverance, but for the first time since the crash, I feel a sense of control, clarity, and hope. The betrayal has been exposed, the deception undone, and the path to healing, though challenging, has begun in earnest. The courtroom was a blur of lights, cameras, and murmurs, but I focused entirely on Derek. Seeing him behind that desk, his smug smile faltering as the evidence mounted, gave me a rush of vindication I hadn't felt in months. Isla was at my side, her hand in mine, her eyes wide but resolute. She had seen the depth of his lies, the lengths he had gone to manipulate both of us, and the fear that once clouded her expression had been replaced by determination. Lawyer Thomas guided me through each motion, each objection, each moment of testimony, making sure Derek couldn't escape the consequences of his actions. The forged documents, the falsified medical records, and even the staged correspondence he had orchestrated to claim my inheritance all laid bare his deception, leaving him visibly shaken as the judge read aloud the evidence. Isla and I had spent countless nights preparing for this moment, discussing every detail, rehearsing every possible lie Derek might try to spin. Our bond had strengthened through shared strategy and quiet support. She had begun calling me Mom, first hesitantly, then more comfortably, a single word that carried the weight of years of separation, pain, and longing. Her presence was my anchor, a living proof that even the darkest betrayals could give rise to genuine connection. Derek, for all his scheming, had underestimated the combined resolve of a mother who had survived a near-death accident and a daughter who had been unwittingly entangled in his greed. During the trial, Derek attempted to shift blame, claiming I had manipulated Isla, insinuating that my accident had made me unstable. But each lie crumbled against the meticulous documentation Lawyer Thomas presented. Witnesses, bank statements, email correspondences, and even Isla's observations dismantled every aspect of his defense. At one point, Derek's expression changed from anger to desperation, then to fear, and finally to resignation. I realized, in that moment, how fragile his control had always been, how dependent his schemes were on secrecy and deception. Once exposed, he was powerless, and the truth became our shield. Outside the courtroom, Isla and I took tentative steps toward building a life together. We visited the places I remembered from my own youth, sharing stories of my adoption and the choices I had made, explaining the pain and love intertwined in our history. Isla listened, asking questions, sometimes with tears, sometimes with frustration, but always with a desire to understand. She shared her own experiences with her adoptive parents, the life she had built without me, and slowly, a narrative of two lives separated yet destined to intersect emerged. We began forming routines, morning coffee together, quiet walks in the park, and long evenings filled with stories, laughter, and the kind of intimacy that only grows from trust and shared vulnerability. The inheritance, initially a source of conflict and greed, became a tool for transformation. I established a foundation in Uncle Leonard's name, focused on supporting young single mothers and children in need, ensuring that the wealth served a purpose beyond personal gain. Isla participated actively, using her experience as a catalyst to empathize with others navigating complex family dynamics. Together, we created programs, hosted community events, and provided scholarships, transforming a legacy that could have been tainted by greed into a beacon of hope and empowerment. Each interaction reinforced the truth that wealth, when wielded with integrity, could heal as much as it could provide. Healing wasn't linear, of course. Nights of doubt crept in, moments when memories of Derek's betrayal threatened to overshadow the progress Isla and I had made. I revisited the hospital, tracing the places where pain had nearly consumed me, and reflected on the journey from near death to empowerment. The scars on my body mirrored the emotional bruises, but they also served as a reminder of resilience, of the strength required to rise after devastation. Isla's presence, along with the support of her adoptive parents who embraced me fully, once the truth emerged, helped me navigate these moments, reminding me that trust and love could indeed flourish again. One particularly memorable evening, Isla and I sat on the balcony of the estate, watching the sun set over the city skyline. The air was crisp, tinged with the smell of autumn leaves and distant rain. "Mom," Isla said softly, leaning into me, "I never thought I'd have a second chance with you." "I'm glad we did." Her words carried the weight of years lost, but also the lightness of hope regained. I held her close, feeling the warmth of her presence, knowing that despite the cruelty Derek had inflicted, we had reclaimed what truly mattered: each other. Derek's sentencing was swift once the trial concluded. He received time in prison for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy, and the court ordered the restoration of all assets to their rightful owner, me. The legal victory was important, but it was the emotional victory, the recognition that Derek could no longer manipulate, control, or harm us, that brought the deepest sense of relief. Isla and I celebrated quietly, aware that true victory lay not in punishment but in reclaiming agency over our lives. As the months passed, our bond deepened. We shared holidays, birthdays, and everyday routines, building a chosen family that transcended the mistakes of the past. Isla began to see me not just as a mother, but as a guide, a confidant, and a friend. I marveled at her resilience, her ability to navigate the trauma Derek had exposed her to while still embracing the opportunity for a fresh start. Together, we redefined what family meant, not merely biology, but trust, loyalty, and shared experience. Professionally, I embraced a new chapter as a writer, channeling my experiences into stories that resonated with others who had faced betrayal, loss, or the struggle to reclaim agency. My foundation continued to grow, providing support and inspiration to those navigating difficult circumstances, while Isla's involvement ensured that the perspective of someone who had experienced adoption and manipulation firsthand remained central to our mission. The estate, once a symbol of Derek's scheming, transformed into a sanctuary of empowerment, creativity, and healing, reflecting on the journey from that devastating crash to the moment Isla and I stood hand in hand, facing a world reclaimed from deceit. I realized how much strength had been forged in the crucible of betrayal. Derek's actions, though cruel and calculated, had inadvertently led me to rediscover purpose, resilience, and the profound connection with the daughter I had thought lost forever. Pain, I learned, could be transformative. Betrayal could illuminate truths, and the courage to confront deception could lead to rebirth. In the quiet moments, I often think about Uncle Leonard's words: the crash, the betrayal, and the emergence of Isla in my life. Each experience, no matter how harrowing, shaped the path to where I am now. I am not just a survivor, I am a mother, a creator, a guide, and a testament to the power of resilience and truth. Isla and I continued to grow together, building a life grounded in honesty, love, and the knowledge that even the darkest betrayals can give rise to the brightest transformations. Now, as I look back, I see the crash, Derek's abandonment, and the initial shock not just as moments of despair, but as catalysts. They propelled me into action, demanded courage I hadn't known I possessed, and ultimately brought me face to face with my daughter, creating a bond stronger than the deceit that had tried to separate us. We are healing, we are rebuilding, and we are thriving, together and stronger than ever. If you've been touched by this story, inspired by resilience, or moved by the journey of Elena and Isla, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with friends, and leave a comment with your thoughts or lessons learned. Stories like these remind us that even in betrayal and pain, the human spirit can rise, rebuild, and reclaim what truly matters. Moral lesson: life often challenges us with pain, betrayal, and choices that feel unbearable. Yet, the story of Elena and Isla reminds us that resilience, courage, and truth can transform even the darkest experiences into opportunities for healing. and growth. Betrayal, as cruel as it may seem, can reveal hidden strengths and illuminate the connections that truly matter. Through patience, strategic thinking, and emotional fortitude, we can reclaim control over our lives, rebuild fractured relationships, and establish new bonds grounded in trust and love. Healing requires time, empathy, and the willingness to confront painful truths, but it also rewards us with clarity, empowerment, and renewed purpose. Inheritance, wealth, or opportunity may appear valuable, but the real treasure lies in resilience, authentic relationships, and the courage to stand up to deceit. Even when life seems to shatter us, we can rise stronger, forge meaningful connections, and create a legacy of love, justice, and hope. Elena and Isla's journey is a testament to the power of perseverance, the transformative nature of truth, and the enduring possibility of redemption and authentic family bonds.